All right, ready to dive deep into motivation theories in education today. We've got a ton of research to unpack, from Maslow to that in-the-zone feeling of flow theory.
It's like we're building a toolkit, really. Each theory gives us a new way to see what motivates people to learn.
So true. Let's start with that classic one, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People always show it as a pyramid, but I kind of think of it like a video game, you know? You got to level up through those basic needs to get to the higher ones.
I like that, a great analogy. It really shows how a student who's dealing with basic needs problems, like being hungry or not feeling safe, they're not going to be focused on schoolwork. They need that solid foundation first.
So a classroom that feels supportive and gives students that sense of belonging, that can actually make a difference in how they learn.
Oh, absolutely. Once those basic needs are met, then students can move on to other things, like feeling accepted, building their confidence, and then eventually reaching their full potential.
That's where things get really interesting to me, that self-actualization. It's like that awesome feeling when a student finds their passion and just takes off.
You got it. And even though Maslow himself said that self-actualization is rare, even trying to reach it can be a powerful motivator.
Makes you wonder, right? Does the way our education system is set up sometimes get in the way of that journey?
That's something to think about. But for now, how about we switch gears to a theory that's all about understanding the why behind what people do, self-determination theory.
Okay, I'm all ears. I love trying to understand what makes motivation tick.
So self-determination theory, or SDT, highlights three key needs, which are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. It basically says that when these needs are met, that's when intrinsic motivation really starts to soar.
So it's not just about those external rewards like grades.
Right. It's deeper than that. Autonomy is about having choices. Competence is about feeling capable. And relatedness is about that feeling of belonging, which we talked about with Maslow.
So imagine a classroom where students have a say in how they learn, they get good feedback that helps them grow, and they feel connected to their classmates. Sounds like a recipe for success, right?
It's definitely a key ingredient. Think about your own motivation for a second. Don't you feel more driven when you have control over what you're doing?
Absolutely. I know if someone's micromanaging me, my motivation just tanks. But give me some freedom, let me get good at something I enjoy, and I'm all in.
You see, it's the same for students too. SDT gives us a framework to design learning experiences that tap into that inner drive.
This is really making sense. But what about setting actual, tangible goals? That's got to be a part of motivation, right? I've always heard how important that is.
You're right. Goal-setting theory says that having clear, challenging goals that students can actually achieve, that can seriously boost motivation. But those goals, they need to be relevant to the student's life. It can't just be about checking things off a list.
So are we talking about SMART goals here? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound.
Bingo! And don't forget about regular feedback along the way. It helps students stay on track, maybe change their approach if they need to, and feel a sense of accomplishment as they go.
Got it. So it's not just about setting the goal and letting them loose. It's about giving guidance and support throughout the process.
Exactly. And when a student reaches their goal, boom, celebrate that win. It reinforces the connection between their effort and their achievement. It keeps the momentum going.
This is sparking so many ideas for my own teaching. Okay, we got to talk about one more before we move on to something else. Expectancy value theory. Yeah.
Yes. This one boils down to two main things. How much you believe you can actually achieve something, that's the expectancy part, and how much you care about the outcome, how much value you place on it.
So if a student thinks I'm going to fail no matter what, or they just don't see the point of the task, they're not going to be motivated. And it wouldn't matter how many stickers or rewards we dangle in front of them.
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly why it's so crucial to connect what they're learning to real-life situations. Show them how the skills they're developing can be used in their lives, in the things they're passionate about.
It's about making sure learning feels meaningful, not just memorizing stuff for a test.
Absolutely. And when we do that, when we nurture their belief in themselves and show them the value of what they're learning, that's when we can really spark that powerful motivational fire.
All right, we've covered some pretty big ideas in motivation theory so far. But I'm curious, what about things like rewards or deadlines, those external factors? Do they really play a role in motivation?
They definitely do, but it's maybe not as straightforward as you might think. Cognitive evaluation theory, we call it CET for short, it looks at how those external factors can actually change a person's intrinsic motivation.
So it's not just a simple case of give a reward, see motivation go up.
Nope, it's more complex than that. CET suggests that the way a student perceives that reward, that's what really matters. If it feels controlling, like they're being bribed to do something, it can actually backfire and make them less intrinsically motivated.
Because it kind of messes with their sense of autonomy, right? Like, I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing it for the prize.
That's it exactly. But here's the interesting part. If that same reward is seen as informational, as recognition of their competence, then it can actually boost their intrinsic motivation.
So a student who sees it as, I earned this because I'm good at this, is going to feel totally different than a student who sees it as, I had to jump through hoops just to get this.
You got it. And this idea applies to feedback too. Criticism can often feel controlling, but guidance that's constructive, that can be super motivating.
It's about framing things in a way that supports their learning and helps them grow, not making them feel like they're being judged.
Okay, so how does all of this fit in with deadlines? I mean, we can't just get rid of deadlines in a classroom. Of course not. Deadlines are important. But again, it comes back to perception. If a deadline feels like it's being forced on them, that's going to decrease motivation.
That whole do this or else vibe. Yeah, I've definitely been there.
But a deadline that's presented as a helpful framework, a way for them to manage their time and effort, that can actually be really useful. It's like giving them a structure to work within.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not about getting rid of external factors completely. It's about using them in a smarter way. Okay, switching gears a bit. What about learning from other people? How does that factor into motivation?
That's where social learning theory comes into play. It emphasizes the power of watching and imitating others, especially people they look up to.
So we're talking teachers, classmates, even those YouTubers they're always watching.
You got it. Students are constantly picking up cues from the people around them. If you've got a teacher who's clearly passionate about learning, that can have a huge influence.
But on the flip side, if a student sees their classmates not caring, that can have a negative effect too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Creating a classroom culture where you've got positive role models and those good behaviors are front and center, that's really important. It sets the tone for everything else.
It makes me think about how motivation isn't just about what's going on inside one person's head. It's affected by the whole environment around them too. And speaking of environments, what about that feeling of being in the zone, that flow state where you're totally absorbed in what you're doing?
Flow theory. That's a fascinating one. Flow happens when you've got a task that's challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so hard that it makes you anxious.
You mean that sweet spot where you completely lose track of time?
Exactly. Having clear goals and getting immediate feedback are really important for achieving flow. It's about providing structure, but also giving them that space for autonomy and mastery.
So a challenging project where they've got clear steps and regular check-ins, that could lead to that flow state, right? Makes me think back to those times when I was so into what I was doing that everything else just faded away.
That's the power of flow. It's its own reward. You do it because it feels good. And when students experience flow, they're not only more engaged, they're learning more effectively too.
This is making me want to go and design some super engaging lessons. But before we get too carried away, there's a question that's been bugging me. We've talked a lot about how to build motivation, but what about those times when students hit a wall? How can we help them develop that resilience to keep going?
That's a great question. It brings us to something called attribution theory. This theory explores how people explain their successes and their failures. Those explanations or attributions, they can have a huge impact on their motivation.
So let's say a student completely bombs a test. If they think it's because they didn't put in enough effort, they might be motivated to work harder next time, right? But if they think it's because they just aren't smart enough, they might just give up.
You nailed it. And this is where teachers can play a really important role. By emphasizing how much effort and strategies matter, we can help students develop those more positive attribution patterns.
So instead of saying things like, you're so smart, we should say, you put in so much work and it really shows.
Exactly. And when they're struggling, help them focus on specific things they can do to improve. Don't let them dwell on what they think are their limitations.
So it's about fostering that growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
That belief that they can learn and improve with effort. Speaking of growth mindset, that's Carol Dweck's work, isn't it? I've heard that term a lot, but could you break it down for me?
Of course. Dweck's research shows that people tend to have one of two mindsets, either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Those with a growth mindset, they believe that they can develop their abilities through hard work and learning. They love challenges and see setbacks as chances to grow.
So they're not afraid to try new things. even if they might mess up. That sounds like a much healthier way to approach learning.
It definitely is. On the other hand, people with a fixed mindset, they believe that their abilities are basically set in stone. They shy away from challenges and give up easily because they don't think they can really get better.
Wow, that sounds incredibly limiting. So, as teachers, how can we encourage that growth mindset in our students? Seems like that would make a huge difference in how motivated they are.
It absolutely does make the difference. And there are several things we can do. First off, it's super important to pay attention to our own mindsets as teachers. Do we believe that all students can learn and grow? Or are we holding some of them back with our own fixed mindset beliefs?
It's like that saying, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly. We need to model that growth mindset ourselves. Then we can focus on praising their effort and the strategies they use, not just the end result.
So celebrate the whole journey, not just the grade on the test.
That's right. And when they make mistakes, help them figure out what went wrong and come up with a plan to do better next time. It's all about reframing mistakes as opportunities to learn, not as failures.
It makes total sense. It's about shifting the focus from being smart to being a learner, someone who's always growing and getting better.
You got it. And another really effective way to foster a growth mindset is to actually teach students about the brain and how it works.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do we do that?
Well, explain to them that the brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Learning new things actually changes the physical structure of the brain.
So the more they challenge themselves, the more they're building up their brain power. That's a pretty awesome idea to wrap your head around.
It is. And when they understand that their brains can actually grow and change, they're more likely to be excited about challenges and keep trying, even when things get tough.
It's like giving them the power to unlock their own potential. So we've talked about mindset, but what about the classroom itself? Does the environment play a role in motivation too?
You bet it does. The physical space and how everyone interacts, those things can make a big difference. A classroom that's bright and organized, that can create a more positive and stimulating environment. Having flexible seating arrangements where they can collaborate and move around, that can help too.
So ditch the rows of desks and create spaces that encourage interaction and a sense of community.
Exactly. And using technology in a smart way can add a whole new dimension to learning. It's about creating a space that feels both stimulating and supportive.
It sounds like we're talking about a holistic approach here. The environment, the teacher's attitude, the way we present challenges, it all works together to build motivation.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of challenges, we can't forget about goal setting, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Setting those smart goals can be really empowering for students.
I can see how having that clear target to aim for could make a difference. But it's not just about individual goals, is it? Can we use goal setting for the whole classroom?
Absolutely. Setting a goal for the entire class, like maybe improving how much everyone participates or working on a community service project together, something like that. It can create a sense of shared purpose and encourage everyone to work together.
It's like we're weaving all these different motivational ideas together to make a really engaging learning experience. This is giving me so much to think about.
It's all connected, that's for sure. But hang on, we've got one more really important element to cover before we finish this deep dive.
Ooh, okay, I'm all ears. What's this super important element we need to talk about?
Well, we've talked a lot about goals, but we haven't really talked about how those goals can actually affect students' beliefs about whether they can actually reach them. That's where expectancy value theory comes in.
Oh yeah, I remember we touched on that a bit earlier. It's all about like how much you believe you can actually do something and how much you value the outcome. So like if a student doesn't see the point of learning algebra, it doesn't really matter if the goal seems achievable or not, right? They're still not going to be motivated.
Exactly. Think back to when you were in school. Were there any subjects where you just really struggled because you just couldn't see the value? Maybe you felt like, ugh, I'm never going to use this in real life.
Oh, for sure. I totally remember feeling that way about history for a while. It felt like just a bunch of random dates and names to memorize. But then I had this one teacher who was amazing, and they were able to connect all those historical events to what was happening in the world today. And suddenly it was like, whoa, this actually matters.
That's a perfect example. That's what we need to do as teachers. We've got to highlight those real-world connections, show them how what they're learning is actually useful in their lives, in their future jobs, in the things they care about.
It's all about making those connections, showing them the why behind it all, but it's also about believing in yourself.
Yeah.
Right? That whole expectancy part of the theory. If a student's already convinced they're going to fail, they probably will.
That's so true. And that's why it's so crucial to help them build self-efficacy. It's about helping students believe that they can actually succeed. And one way we can do that is by giving them chances to actually experience success, even if it's just small wins along the way.
So like breaking down those big, overwhelming goals into smaller steps that feel more manageable.
You got it. Celebrate those milestones, those little victories along the way, and give feedback that focuses on their effort and how much they've improved, not just the final result.
It's like we're helping them exercise their confidence muscle, showing them that they can learn and get better over time. Wow, we've really covered a lot of ground today. From Maslow's pyramid to this whole idea of expectancy and value, it's pretty clear that motivation is a pretty complex thing.
It is. It's multifaceted. But the amazing thing is that all these theories, even though they each have their own focus, they all work together to give us this really rich understanding of what makes people want to learn. They give us a roadmap for creating learning experiences that really tap into that intrinsic motivation, that natural desire people have to learn and grow.
It's like we've built this awesome toolkit for creating a classroom that's just buzzing with motivation.
I like that. And remember, this isn't just for students. These theories, they apply to all of us, no matter what we're learning or where we're learning it.
That's so true. So whether you're a teacher, a parent, or just someone who loves to learn new things, these insights can help you tap into that motivational magic.
Keep those brains buzzing, everyone.